No.
Well, technically, shouldn't the chief operating officer with technology reports to really be driving?
You would think.
One would hope.
Okay, we're good.
Well, technically, shouldn't be. All righty. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the May 20th Cheshire Board of Education business meeting. Carol, may we have a roll call, please?
Sure. Mr. Grippo?
Here.
Ms. Howland?
Here.
Ms. Ham? Ms. Harrigan?
Here.
Mr. Martelli?
Here.
Mr. Perugini?
Here.
And Mr. White?
Here.
Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Carol. I asked that we stand for the pledge, and I think Jeff is going to show us the flag. A pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
And to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Well, again, good evening. Hope everyone's in good spirits on this beautiful, still spring day. Can't believe May is almost over. We're approaching Memorial Day weekend soon, and before you know it, we'll be into graduation, which I think Jeff has some news to talk about later this evening. But that being said, I believe we have an update from our student representatives. That'll be Lucy and Joshua.
Yes, thank you. So we're going to start off with athletics tonight. First, spring sports playoffs will start this weekend with many of our teams qualifying for postseason play. Some of Cheshire's teams are currently state ranked in the top 10. Seniors PJ Cass and Sarah Compute were named the CIAC Scholar Athletes for Cheshire High School. Both students received this award based on their athletic performances while maintaining high academic achievements. Finally, the high school held a third college signing day this past month, recognizing 9 seniors who signed letters of intent to play their chosen sport in college. Next up, the Peer Health Education class held a high school leadership conference at CHS yesterday. About 60 students from the junior and sophomore classes were invited to attend. The day included activities, a scavenger hunt, various speakers, and a panel. Some of you may have seen our very own Dr. Solon participating in the jump roping activity, so that was very fun. The speakers included CHS graduates Steve Bowman and Paige Remillard. CHS graduate Sebastian Little could not attend the event in person, so he sent in videos to be shown to the students where he spoke about qualities relating to leadership. Finally, the Peer Health class would like to thank all of the teachers who helped make the event possible, specifically Mrs. Wellspeak, Mrs. Flood, and of course, Mr. Lee.
In addition, the next gen science standards testing for all juniors is the week of May 24th to 28th. The Student Senate is sponsoring a virtual talent show on May 26th, so that should be fun. Friday evening from 7 to 10 p.m., CHS Drama is hosting their screening of Little Woman. And after Friday, the production will be available for viewing by the public. And also look for the Unified Theater production of 2021 with a theme of gratitude, which is in the filming process right now. And there's a viewing party set for June 2nd. The production will then be live streamed. And lastly, students are anticipating the upcoming proms. Junior and senior proms will be June 3rd and 4th, respectively, at the ARIA. And that's all we have.
Great. Thank you, Lucy and Josh. Any questions from the board? Seeing as there are none, I thank you both for being here this evening. I can let you go and so you can enjoy the rest of this
Catherine's
beautiful
got a
evening.
quick question.
Oh, I'm sorry, Tim, I didn't see it. Oh, by the way, for board members, I know the chat's here a little different in Zoom, but there's a chat button on the bottom of your screen. Feel free to raise your hand there, and if you don't get my attention, just chime in on the call. I'm sorry, Tim, you wanted to ask a question?
I think Catherine was first.
Oh, thanks, Tim.
Catherine,
So I just wanted to clarify. So when the Little Women is available for public viewing, is that going to be on the Cheshire website? I mean, it's obviously a YouTube thing, right? So the link's going to be on our website, or
Yeah,
Where's it going to be, Jeff?
to be honest with you,
Or Josh?
I'm not entirely certain.
You'd ask Mike.
I know that there's a
right.
history with our shows that the licensing agreement prohibits us from broadcasting. So I'm not sure that, like, I can't guarantee that it'll be on our YouTube page.
Oh,
And so it may be a linked one-time view, but I will look into that right now.
yeah, right. Okay. It'd be great to be able to see it. So thank you. Thanks, Josh and Lucy. I have no other questions.
Tim?
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, thanks, Tony. Lucy, you had mentioned we had the third signing day and it was 9 students. I'm just curious, like, do you happen to know how many students signed college scholarships? Were they full rides, partial rides? Just curious. I think it's normally 20 to 30. You had told me before, Jeff, in a given year. Is that, I mean, the pandemic, I'm just curious if that affected this in any way this year.
Not entirely sure how many students in total. I know there was 3 signings, and I would say like I'm just totally estimating right now, but 9 is probably average to have at a college signing.
Okay.
I would say no more than 10, and the scholarships vary from student to student.
Okay.
And yeah, I think Lucy's last point about scholarships varying, I don't think people realize, for example, I know Division I tennis, the full team, NCAA allots 4.5 scholarships to. And there's more than, there's probably 15 people on the team. So, you can sign a commitment to play someplace. Typically, it's not a full athletic scholarship.
Yeah, to Dr. Solon's point, just because a senior has signed a letter of intent to a school to play for athletics, that doesn't necessarily mean they're going for a scholarship.
Okay.
Great. Any other questions from the board? Seeing as there are none, Lucy and Josh, thank you again. Enjoy the rest of your evening and look forward to seeing you again.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, guys.
Up next, audience public Q&A. I should have said this being in the meeting. So unfortunately, we could not meet in person tonight. We did resume in-person meetings a couple weeks ago. Unfortunately, Mike, our AV lead, could not help us this evening. So we're left to fend for ourselves here on Zoom. But that being said, we are taking questions and comments from people watching the public via CPS COVID-19 at cheshire.k12.ct.us. That being said, Jeff, do we have any inquiries yet?
Yes, we had 2 different emails. One was or 2 different topics, I should say. One was from a parent, Emily. I apologize if I'm mispronouncing this, but I believe it's Dennis. She was very appreciative of the work being done in the school system this year and the amount of in-person instruction we've been able to provide, and finally asked if we believe that the COVID-19 vaccine will be mandatory for students next year, which I thought was a great question. And I did reply to her already, but I publicly share that I don't believe that will be the case. And I want to clarify, the state determines what vaccines are necessary for entrance in public schools. The COVID-19 vaccine has never been brought up is one that would be required. And I believe it takes legislation to do that unless it's through executive order. And I don't foresee either of those things happening by next fall. So I don't believe that the COVID-19 vaccine will be required. The other item was probably about 20 form letters that came in today, all stating the same thing about the desire to have high school graduation in person. I know Dr. Gadd had sent an email in April telling people that that's our desire, obviously, and that, with the change in state guidance, we'll review that. Well, the state changed guidance yesterday, and today was the first day we had the opportunity to know, like, formally be certain of what the guidance would be. We reviewed that with Maura Esposito, and we will be holding a single graduation ceremony that'll look a lot like previous ceremonies, and there'll be more on that in my superintendent's report. Amen.
Great. Thank you, Jeff. Moving on, we move to the consent calendar. In our Board of Ed packets, we have approval of a grant resolution. Jeff or Vincent, you want to walk us through that before we call for a motion?
Is that you, Vin, or do you want Marlene?
Yeah, Marlene was going to report on the grant activity. Is there a resolution that goes with that?
There is a consent calendar motion.
I'll make a motion for it if you want.
Yeah, then we can, I don't know if we want to do discussion at that point, but it's linked in the agenda. Basically, it says that we authorize, as the board, the superintendent to apply for and accept any and all grants that may be determined appropriate by the administration. It's encouraging me and our team to look for revenue sources associated with whatever work that we're doing and move them for the board for it says for approval, but I do have the authority to apply for these grants. And you know, it's just encouraging the superintendent of schools to seek additional revenue sources that align with our needs. And we're frequently doing that. Marlene sent me one probably 10 minutes before this meeting.
Yeah, and for the board, I just wanted to, although this is, nobody here is no longer new on the board since we're, well into year 2 of some of our tenure and beyond. So I know last year this came for the first time for newer folks and some questions around how the grants are actually applied for in authority. So this is the same policy. It really hasn't changed. But that being said, Tim, if you want to make a motion, we can have further discussion if needed.
Motion that the Cheshire Board of Education approves the consent calendar as presented.
Is there a second? Catherine seconds. Adam's a distant third. Any discussion? Seeing as there is none, the motion is that the Cheshire Board of Education approves the consent calendar as presented. All those in favor, please raise your hands. It is unanimous. Thank you, team. Moving on, we are going to reports of standing committee, starting with curriculum. Faith could not be here this evening, so Ann will be filling in on that report. Thank you, Ann.
Great. So this is a report of curriculum committee meeting on Monday, May 10th.
I would help Ann. Unfortunately, I could not make that meeting, so I apologize.
No, that's okay. So we had several informational items that we spoke about. We talked about textbook recommendation change for the personal finance course. This course has a textbook that is paid for by Tungus Community College. And so Leslie Pear of the CHS Business Department presented an update to the textbook request for the advanced personal finance course. And the text covers the same essential material that Tungus Community College does. And they're using this textbook for the course, and they continue to pay for the text for Cheshire students enrolled in the course. For informational items, we got an update on district-wide field trips. There have been several requests for trips to places like Camp Sloper. And the emphasis of many of these trips is to help foster team building and bring students together in a way that has been difficult this year. So safety precautions and planning have been at the forefront for each of these trips. And this really was brought to the curriculum subcommittee so that just the board is aware that some of these field trips have resumed this year. We had an update from Dr. Mary Gadd, the CHS principal. She shared with us an update on the high school schedule for 2021-22. This past school year, CHS moved to a block schedule consisting of 80-minute periods where students meet on alternate days, and we've talked about this some already. Moving forward for the 2021-22 school year, CHS will continue to use a block schedule on a 4-day rotation. And this schedule will allow for 4 lunch waves to accommodate a reduced number of students because we've increased the space between students in the cafeteria. And the schedule allows for 2 support periods, 2 40-minute time slots within one block, as well as allowing for an advisory period, and all of this without changing the schedule. Next, we discussed the Algebra 2 textbook selection. We had a report from Lisa Barnaby, Stephen DeFalco, and John Redford. They gave a summary of the Algebra 2 textbook selection process and the recommendation. I believe this is a digital textbook. The selection committee identified needs to align to the Common Core and the newly revised SAT, meet the needs of 21st century digital learners, as well as include formative and summative assessment data resources. So the recommendations emphasize the strong rating for the Envision Algebra 2 textbook through Ed Reports. It was a great presentation, actually. Other strengths of the textbook include promoting self-directed learners, providing instant feedback for students, and using data to help monitor student progress and drive instruction. And then we talked about the Cheshire Curriculum Council, the CCC, the Business Executive Summary presentation. And again, Ms. Leslie Payer shared an executive summary of the business presentation to the CCC on April 6 of 2021. Some key points of emphasis included how business classes support complex thinking and social emotional learning through real world experiences, business experiences. 3 courses in the business department will be offered for college credit through Tungus Community College, as we stated earlier. And additional goals for the next 5 years include researching and other dual enrollment opportunities with another community college, exploring opportunities to work with the mastery-based performance assessment, student experiences, and collaborating with colleagues to update curriculum and appropriate resources for each course. I believe we had some nice discussion on how far this business program has come at CHS over the years. And I would add that we had a brief discussion when we were talking about the high school schedule. I brought up the idea of revisiting high school start times, and I just wanted to put that out there because it's probably coming down the line, and we'll talk about it in curriculum committee and discuss how we can start to educate people on the importance of physical and mental health of our teenagers, and what it means, start to investigate what that means for Cheshire Public Schools, specifically the high school. So I would ask that maybe a line be added to the minutes on that, and then
We can do that in the curriculum committee meeting, next meeting, and make the adjustment.
yeah, exactly.
Thank you.
And that wraps up my report.
So any questions for Ann on the curriculum committee report? Tim?
Thanks, Tony. Yeah, I'm not sure if this is for Ann or for Jeff or Marlene. So Ann mentioned we're going to stick with the 80 minutes for the block schedule, and you've generally gotten a positive reception. Maybe not everybody, but generally you've gotten a positive reception from students with that this year.
Yeah,
Okay.
This year was an anomaly in the sense that we really didn't have a choice. And so I think there was an adjustment period. And as I mentioned, I think in our last meeting, I'd be willing to bet things are going to be better in the fall and that it'll be more normal than it has in the past. But we've been focusing on the benefits of adjusting the time period. No student can just sit there and listen to a lecture for 80 minutes. But you can really leverage 80 minutes of instruction differently than you can leverage 50. And so we have found that to be very beneficial.
Okay.
And so that's why I think we're enthusiastic about making this transition into an 80-minute block schedule next year. And it follows suit with a lot of our peers in Durg B that made similar moves.
Okay.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but our discussion also centered on our faculty at the high school really like those bigger block times so that they can incorporate more, I don't know, hands-on kinds of things in the classroom.
Well, I think there are a myriad of positive benefits from an 80-minute period that are harder to derive in a 50-minute period. So there is more opportunity for application time where, if you're familiar with a model of I do, we do, you do, to stretch that over 80 minutes is much easier to facilitate. And when you get to the we do part, I don't know about you, when I got home with my homework, it's like, damn, I knew this in school. And so now when you're engaging in some of that work in the class, there's a better opportunity to make sure that you do have that clarity of understanding and can follow through on it in the application component.
Okay, and you think that, and your belief right now is that is even a positive, because what I realized, even though I kind of knew it in the back of my head, seniors are very different from freshmen. So you're thinking across the board, the 4 years for all of those.
Yeah, I think
80 minutes. Okay.
Absolutely, there are developmental differences between students, but I think as Ann was getting to, we're trying to engage students differently with movement, with application in classes, and that's going to look different when you're 14 than when you're 18. Sure. And the other thing is too, with an 80-minute block, opportunities like, I know you're familiar with our portfolio-based assessment for graduation requirement. There are more opportunities to do engagement off campus on those things. Later in the show, I'll be talking about Richard Chevrolet and some of the stuff they've done with our kids, and how these extended blocks of time provide us more opportunities for really deep and engaging work that you might not be able to cover in 50 minutes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I think it's quick. I think these are really quick. The 4 days versus 5 days, you're going to move to a 5-day schedule. You're not.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. And you're just going to rotate it like A, B, C, D, like you do in the elementary schools. It's okay. It's going to be.
It will be a rotating schedule. Yeah, we will maintain that. There are some quirks in the sense that we have shared staff with the middle school, so it's okay. Not
they're going to be in school
5 days a week. I guess easy to describe. I was a principal there for 4 years. I still couldn't tell you the schedule. Okay. It was a little sophisticated for me.
And I'm wondering about, you mentioned the business department giving credits at Tunxus. Is it like how many credits could a student get, and is it possible to get to the point where you even nearly have an associate's degree by the time you graduate high school?
Right,
we have go-getter.
Yeah, we have a number of students who take what's called dual enrollment courses. So we're excited that we had previously only leveraged UConn for those classes, and really this started to come into favor right as I was leaving my tenure at Cheshire High and Mary was becoming principal. We realized that a student could take an AP class, and those are incredibly beneficial. We really believe that every student should take one college style class before they leave Cheshire High School, and for some that AP is the best fit for that. but ECE is an incredible early college experience opportunity through UConn, where you can take a 3 credit class for, I want to say it's like $100. It's incredibly cheap. It's,
I think it was 90. Yeah, it's my daughter took a few of those. Yeah, I think it might have been less than that 2 years.
yeah, transferable credit.
Yeah.
So that's really powerful, but not everybody is going to be appropriate as a high schooler to take a UConn level course. And nor might they not have those interests. And so we're really excited to be, to have a community college partner to provide us a broader range of courses with more opportunities for our kids to take a collegiate level class. So yeah, I mean, we have kids that graduate with at least a full year of credit. In some cases, it's rare to get 30 credits in a year, but over your high school career, but at least a semester, I should say, of credit. That's not uncommon.
Thank you.
And if I could just add, I think these relationships with the community colleges are just, they're perfect. That they're perfectly suited to be working with these high schools. And I just give a lot of kudos out to Leslie Pear and, you know, the business department, because
Sean McEwen,
yeah,
career
because
tech ed.
they're really cultivating these relationships, and it's really to great benefit for our students.
Yeah, Mary in our guidance department, there's a team of folks that have really been trying to provide these options for our kids, and I'm excited that we're expanding them.
Thank you.
Andrew, did you have a question?
Yeah, just when you were talking about the change of the schedule at Cheshire High School, has that been decided for next year, or is it still being?
Yeah, we are making that change. And I know Mary was sending out information. I apologize, I'm not positive if it went out already or not. I know like, we've been pretty well caught up in graduation stuff and guidance changing, but I know she's discussed it with the PTA at least.
Okay, thank you.
It hasn't gone out formally yet.
Any other questions for Ann on the curriculum committee report? Seems there are none. Ann, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Let's see here, I got too many documents open. On the next, we have finance, starting with the finance report. Adam and Vincent, I assume you're going to tag team this.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will graciously hand the meeting over to Mr. Massiana.
Thank you, Mr. Grippo. Good evening, everyone. I am about to share my screen. Hopefully you can see. We're good?
Yep.
Okay, so I'll walk through the financial report first, and this report will be rather brief. You know, we've completed 10 months of the fiscal year. You know, I would say that we are in very good shape to meet our budget. I don't foresee any issues now that we've got 10 months completely down. You know, during the month of April, May, and early June, what we will be focusing our energies on, and it's already started in earnest, is, you know, looking at any open purchase requisitions, reducing those or closing those that we will not need for the remainder of this fiscal year. We're also entering new purchase orders for the purchases that we do need to make between now and the end of the year. Also in May, we open up the supply bid and release that to all the schools. So all the schools will be entering their supply needs for next year. We also make all the arrangements for purchases of equipment. Quotes are being obtained for, you know, maintenance and summer projects that we have to do that we fund out of our operating budget with the funds we have. Also, summer curriculum work is being planned and encumbered for purchase of textbooks, technology. So all that activity, you know, culminates over the next several weeks, and then that leads us to look toward June 30th, when we will, you know, work with the Board of Education to make the final entries to close our books for the fiscal year. But what I do want to leave the board with is that we are in very, very good shape for a good close to this year's budget, which starting the year, we really didn't know what to expect, but we got through the year in really good shape. The medical benefits report, I'm not going to touch on from this report. I'll come back and I'll present the report. And there's a problem loading the page. So 3 of the 4 pages load. Of course, the page that I need isn't loading. So bear with me just 1 second. Let me see if I can bring that up.
And if it's part of our financial report in the packet, we have those pages we can look into.
Yes, it is.
I had the same problem. I just refreshed the document. It seemed to come back.
Yeah.
You can also just
There we go.
you can download it from the buttons up there.
Yeah, that's what I did. Okay, so you could see this one that's got the purple columns to the right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so what this is, it's an update on the ESSER 2 and the ARP ESSER grant funding that we did get approval for the request we made for the ESSER 2 funding, which is $439,559. What I do want to point out to the board is there's been a change to the amount of funding we'll receive under ARP ESSER. The original estimate we had was $1,091,000. And if you could see where my cursor is, that amount after being passed by the Senate, our final approved amount was $898,147. So it came down about $190,000 over what we were originally advised it would be. Not the end of the world, but it is a lower dollar amount. And again, as we explained to the board, we intend on using these funds, next fiscal year and as much as we can over the following 2 fiscal years. The top section is really what I wanted to just focus on for a second. So a grant application was submitted to the state for the original $439,559. And you'll see that these top 8 or so categories are all labeled learning loss. They total the full $439,559. And again, I know the board members have this in their package, but what we'll be covering in 21-22, with that learning loss category is everything from the summer transition program that we'll be conducting in August for those students that were remote, that will be coming back to school in the fall, as well as additional tutoring time we expect to need, the addition of the administrator and coaching supports that we have planned for next year that Jeff presented at the last board meeting, the certified math tutors at Dot and Cheshire High School, additional teacher and staff training to address learning loss, administrator training, certification for English learner needs, as well as some homeschool support. So, we've identified the state's approved that grant funding for those particular purposes. And again, that's part of ESSER 2. The rest of the items that we have on this list, they're really kind of early estimates at this point. And I'll point to just the first one. We have 150,000 of that grant identified as possibly being needed for tent and table rentals. Whether or not we'll need that in the fall, we hope not to need it. But depending on how the infection rate goes over the summer, comfort level, of parents and students and staff, we may need to use that. And if we don't need it, then that 150,000 obviously becomes available, and we'll use it for the needs that we have over the next 2 fiscal years. So I just wanted to point out to the board that there have been some adjustments made on those 2 grants that we have use of. So I'll pause there. I'll stop sharing my screen for a moment and see if there are any questions on that portion of the financial report.
Are there any questions? I can't see all of you. Let me see. Hold on a second. Let me change my view.
And Catherine and Andrew in that order.
Oh, here we go. I see the chat. Okay, looks like Tim, go ahead.
Thanks, Adam. Vin, you had mentioned, if I caught it correctly, there was some funding in there for teaching in relation to English, not as a first language.
Correct.
How many students do we have in town who English is not their first language? Is there a number you can give?
Maybe Marlene or Jeff can.
I would say we're at least at about 84. I don't know what it is as of today, but the last time I checked.
Really? Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Were there any other questions? Andrew, go ahead.
In the 20 classrooms that are going to be outfitted with the technology, have those rooms been identified?
They have not. Yeah, they have not. Yeah, and that's something that we would, make a determination over the summer, and try to get those installed for the start of the new school year. But, we may have some variations to how we originally designed those rooms. And, I know that Marlene has been gathering feedback, from the teachers that have been using them to see if we make some tweaks to the next round of installs to make it better.
Got it. Thank you.
Are there any other questions on this section of the presentation? Seeing none, Vin, continue on.
Brace yourself. I'm going to bring up the medical benefits report. So for the month of April, the claims were about, well, not about $1,032,083. So, we did see claims drop January and February as expected, but unfortunately they've come back up in March and April to the $1 million level. This month, we did receive an additional $73,122 in stop loss reimbursements. So the total stop loss reimbursements we've received for the year are $416,000, just under that. And so the net decrease to the trust fund balance in April was $228,936. As of month end, in April, the medical reserve fund balance stood at, just lost my screen there one second, $996,706. So we've got, around 1 month's worth of, total reserve left. We have 2 months remaining in this fiscal year. The claims, they are what they are. We're hoping that they do subside. And we know that as we enter the 21-22 fiscal year, we've worked with the board and the town council on increasing that budget line so that we're funding our claims, and our contributions are in line with the claim funding for next year. There's been discussion, although the town council hasn't approved their budget yet, the plan is to essentially contribute 1.5 million directly to that reserve fund balance to shore it up so that as we go through next year, if claims, are meeting budget or above budget, we will have an adequate reserve to work against. And we are having some analysis done at year end by Cigna and by USI, our broker, to take a look further into what drove the claims this year. We knew, from the analysis that I've done and presented to the board, that we've had an inordinate amount of claims over $25,000 that didn't meet that $175,000 threshold where we would get money back in stop loss reimbursements. So unfortunately, it was another $1 million month, and we just hope it subsides. And I'll stop there and see if there are questions.
Tony, you had a comment.
Yeah, Faith couldn't be here to see, and I did talk to her today. I was covering, some things for the meeting tonight. One thing that her and I discussed, and I don't know if it's applicable here, Vincent, I know several years ago when the Affordable Care Act was passed, the then board and town council got together, and we, with you and I believe our actuaries, I don't know if it's the actuaries, but our insurance broker potentially, they walked us through the whole myriad of fees and potential future costs of that. Is there something similar that we can do with them to kind of walk us through this analysis? So we have more detailed questions from them. For example, Faith was asking about CPI percentage being utilized and other things. I know we keep bombarding you on this. I think the board may feel a little better, hearing from them and, taking them to task on that. But if it's an option, we take it offline, but just want to put it out there with an idea that Faith and I had tossed around.
Sure. We could certainly bring, a representative from USI is Tom Kowalczyk, and I can actually bring Anna from Cigna, who's the account representative as well. So, we can make a presentation, either directly at a board meeting, or a finance committee meeting that's easily arranged. I would suggest we wait till we get the year-end numbers. This way we have a comprehensive look at, where we wound up for the year compared to last year. And they'll identify, and they do this for us every year. They do it internally, to myself and, the HR manager here, Angela Latch. We work with the town. We do that together. There's no reason we can't share that information.
Yeah,
And have a presentation for the board. I think it would be helpful.
Yeah, thanks, man. I didn't mean like anytime soon. I'm thinking after dust settles, the year end. I did have some questions for Cigna, based on my healthcare background. And, a few weeks ago, we met the town council on budget. We had a lot of discussion on this, and we seem to focus on the reserve amount. But, the reserve amount not being touched, the reserve amount is not driving these $1 million claims. So eventually it's going to get depleted. Right. So I know I'm talking to some colleagues on the town council, still a little concerned about the trend, and as I understand it, I think the town side is seeing a different trend. I think it might be slightly lower, if at all. So it's, seems very applicable to us only. Not sure why.
Yeah, I know that. I was talking to Sean Kimball, the town manager, and, they started the year off in very rough, high claim territory, and their reserve balance dropped to somewhere, around 2 months, but they've had, very, very good claim experience, and their reserves are back up to 5 months now. Now, they are smaller in terms of total employee size and claim size, but they're in really good shape right now.
Okay, that's all I had. Thank you, Vincent.
Okay.
Ann, you had a question.
Yeah, thanks. And before I forget, Vin, I would really appreciate some sort of presentation on that, because I find this information a little convoluted sometimes. But also, I know it's been mentioned several times, but I'm a little unclear on how that infusing $1,500 and taking it from where and taking it out of our budget. So I guess my question is, so what does that do to our budget process next year?
Okay, so as discussed at the town council, what they want to do, and I'll kind of make the numbers high level. So we've requested $2 million to be used to increase our contribution for claims next year. What the council is planning to do, and they're going to reduce that by $1 million. I'll just put the caveat out there that, the council can't control any individual line item. So what they would ask that the board to do is, when they reduce the budget, that $1 million that they are reducing our budget by for medical benefits, that the Board of Education follows their lead. So they're going to reduce our $2 million request down to $1 million. So the impact of that is, to make it easy, we're funding $1 million less than we need to keep up with our expected claims next year. To offset that, what the town council is going to do is take $1.5 million and contribute it right to the reserve fund. So our operating budget is going to go down from what our request is. And so we won't be funding contributions to equal claims. We're expecting claims of $900,000 per month next year. We'll be funding about $825,000 a month. but the reserve balance will increase by $1.5 million. So to the extent that the contributions don't cover the claims, we're going to be dipping into the reserve that's been increased. So the fast forward in the following year, if claims are $900,000 per month again, we're going to have to ask for an additional $1 million in next year's budget request so that contributions will equal claims. So we're going to have pretty much the same discussion next year if the council does it this way. It's not a bad solution, but it does force us to have the same conversation again next year. I know one of the things that the council expressed is, they're hoping that our claims don't come in at $900,000 per month next year. If they come in at $825,000 per month, then we won't be eating into any of the reserve. So they're basically buying a year to see what happens. And that $1.5 million, is being funded through the use of the funds that the town is receiving for, all the different grants, which is about $8.5 million related to COVID.
That was my next question. So what's the advantage of doing it this convoluted way? And you just answered that, right?
Well, it's not convoluted. If you think about it, $2.5 million infusion in 1 year is pretty large. So I think they're trying to infuse over 2 years. But, and Vince, you want to ask this, I'm thinking as you were talking about, hey, if we stay at $900,000 level, which I'm skeptical of that until I see a trend, we may be talking middle of next year and with town council about, hey, the trend hasn't changed. We're still dipping into the reserves. Plenty of that money sooner or later. Hopefully we'll get there. But if the town sticks the course of fully funding the reserve for 2 years, that's great. But I think we got to get to root cause in these claims to really be sure of an ultimate plan. That's my opinion.
Yeah, and Tony, to add some information, the town council did acknowledge that, if the $1.5 million, isn't sufficient and there's an additional infusion that's needed, there is the town's reserve fund balance that can be tapped. Hopefully we don't need to do that, and to answer your question, part of the strategy is, by doing it this way, it does enable the town council to keep, the budgets down and the mill rate lower.
Thank you, Vin.
You're welcome.
It seems like Catherine's question has been answered. Sounds like. Good. Your question was convoluted, or are you still? Would you still like to ask a question, Catherine? You're also.
That's from Ian. That's not from me.
I'm sorry. My apologies. For me, I'll just say that I'm sad that the claims continue at the $1 million level. There was hope for a moment there. I'm not sure how much hope there is now, and I'm in agreement, I think, with the rest of the board that we really need to get to the bottom of this to find out what's going on, if this is going to continue, if there was some sort of substantive change to the demographics or to the cost structure that we are completely unaware of, and that the actuaries have not acknowledged, or something to find out what our new normal will be for our medical benefits. So I think that'll be great, since it appears that perhaps our cost allocations may be determined already for next year, but I think we'll come to that final determination. But to really get a handle on it. Tim, you had a question.
Thanks, Adam. So the new teacher's contract, which is what, 350, 400 out of 6 or 650, so maybe 2/3 a year staff, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Roughly.
So that starts July 1. The other union contracts they're not changing on July 1.
Correct.
Or administrators would, so it's another 20 people, something like that. Adam just mentioned the cost structure. Do you have any sense right now? Is there anything you can anticipate based on the new contracts relating to changes in the cost of medical benefits in any
No,
significant way?
no. In fact, the new contracts, do call for an increase in the contribution that the teachers and the administrators make for the purchase of their medical benefits. There is no, there's no change in the core benefits we provide. They haven't increased. The only thing that's changed is the contribution the employees make to have their insurance.
And what does that multiply out to? Even if it was 100,000, which would be on the high side, times 400, $10 a month or something.
It's $1.7 million for the year across all our employees. That's the money that we will collect from them that offsets, the cost of the medical benefits that we provide.
Okay, so 2/3 of that would be $1 million, and then you're talking about going from what, 13% to 14% for the first year? Or?
Yeah, I'd have to look up because I don't want to quote you the wrong percentages, but it's 14 or 15.
Okay, so it'll probably be, in my mind, I'm thinking that's probably somewhere in the ballpark of 100 to 150,000 in a year, $10,000 a month.
Okay.
So it's different. It's better from our perspective, from management's perspective, but it's not in the hundreds of thousands of dollars.
No.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I see no other questions in the chat. Let's see. Vin, were you going to report there's an agenda item for grant activity?
Well,
did we go through that already?
No, we didn't. But the next
Okay.
item on the agenda is the town audit report, student activity operational review, and then report on grant activity. So you tell me
kind of
which
skipped
one you
over all
want to
that
do
stuff.
first.
Oops. Yeah, let's stay in order, Vin. Let's stay in order.
All right, so I'll
My
give you an
apologies.
update first on the result of the town audit, which is annual. This year, though, we do have new auditors. The previous auditors for the town, RSM, when we went out to bid, they actually did not submit a proposal. They're exiting the municipal audit business. So Bloom Shapiro were appointed as the new auditors, and they're auditing they audited the 1920 fiscal year. Bloom Shapiro is now called Clifton Larson Allen, CLA for short. So we'll start talking about CLA in upcoming years. The town council met on May 11th and voted to accept the audit report for the 1920 fiscal year. And I also wanted to mention that the town council also on May 11th voted to appoint CLA as auditors for the 2021 fiscal year, which was fully expected. The first year audit, whenever you change auditors, it usually takes a lot more time because the new auditors are not familiar with the procedures and the practices, that occur on the town and the Board of Ed side. So quite a bit of staff time, on both sides was expended to complete this year's audit. Next year's audit should be more streamlined. Again, that was all expected. Now, overall, the town did receive a clean audit opinion. There were no material weaknesses or significant deficiencies identified, which is great news. There were two findings that I did want to mention to the board members in the federal grant audit that was completed on the Board of Ed side. And there were two recommendations that came out of it. One has to do with the audit of the IDEA grant, which is roughly $1 million per year that we receive to provide services to our students with special needs. The way that grant is allocated, for the most part, it's used primarily to pay salaries of special education teachers, staff, the secretaries who provide special ed support, which we have in each school. So one of the findings was that the allocation, the formula that we used for the allocation needs to follow some universal guidance. They didn't find that we were not compliant, but they wanted us to look at our procedure have a periodic review done by the special ed, the Director of Pupil Personnel, just to confirm that, the employees that are providing services are providing them based on the allocation percentage. Special education secretaries, 50% of their salary is allocated to this grant. So the auditors are just looking to confirm that we review that periodically and sign off on it. So that's one thing that's easy to implement, and we've already, essentially, prepared Google spreadsheets, so we'll be able to comply with that. And the auditors will look for this in next year's audit. And the second item had to do with procurement procedures that are followed. There was some new uniform guidance that was passed, which frankly we weren't aware of. This applies both to the Board of Ed and town side. So we've received a list of, the guidance rules that we need to follow. So we'll be implementing that, working with the town staff as well. And then the management letter that was issued, there were some additional recommendations that were made by CLA. One is to have a fraud tip hotline. And we're working with the town on establishing that. It's actually, there's a company called Fraud Tip Hotline that provides, a service, and it's pretty moderately priced. So we'll be implementing that. They also recommended a fraud risk assessment across the town and Board of Ed, and the development of an accounting procedures manual. So all three of those items, the fraud tip hotline, whether or not we're going to do a fraud risk assessment, and the accounting procedures manual, we'll be working with Board of Ed and town staff, to determine what we're going to do and how to do it. So that is the update on the 1920 audit. And I believe, if it's not already posted, the comprehensive annual financial report for the town, which includes the findings and the letter of opinion from the auditors, is posted annually on the town's website. And that is the update on the town audit.
Thank you, Mr. Massiana. Are there any questions about the audit itself, the town audit? Not seeing anything here. We can,
Could I-
sure, go ahead.
Yeah, Vin, you had mentioned that you were unaware of new procurement guidance.
Yeah, there were uniform guidelines that were passed that took effect in 2019-20. So, we got some of the base details on what it is. They advise that this is a common finding, as they're doing reviews of towns and boards of ed.
Yeah, that you missed it. I get that, but I'm just wondering about who would normally give you a heads up on that guidance, because that's the bigger issue from my perspective.
Yeah, and normally we actually probably would get something like that from the audit firm.
Okay, so it'd be more from the auditors than from CABE.
Yeah, something like that, most likely. It's just like compliance with, GASB rulings. And I attribute some of the findings to, a new auditor, new set of eyes. So there is, logic in changing auditors in this case.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely.
The prior audit firm didn't engage. And, I don't think there's anything that we're doing that's incorrect. In fact, there's, a lot of language about micro purchases that might streamline the procurement process for us. So, as we delve into the details, we'll be, incorporating that so that, we are compliant.
Yeah, no, I'm confident that you're going to figure this one out. It's just going forward, whatever we can do to try to get better guidance so we don't miss things, because something could be a bigger deal that we miss.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Okay.
Seeing no other questions, Vin, I guess, could you move on to the student activity operational review?
Yes. So at the board's request, I did speak with Jeff Solon, Jeff Ziplow from CLA. So this is the audit firm, although it's not the auditor partner. It's a partner that does more consulting and does a lot of internal control and review consulting work. So we talked to them about the scope of what a student activity review would look like. And just to remind the board, when we went out to bid, they did provide a quote of $12,000, not to exceed $12,000 to complete a student activity review here for the Cheshire Public Schools. So what they explained that they would look at, it would be a review of policy and controls. They would review the controls on how we do our bank reconciliations. You know, they would look at the school size, the size of the bank balances, the number of transactions. They'll confirm how funds are collected, tracked, and monitored. They would test some transactions as part of the review. They would estimate that it's about a 4-week process to complete the review. The first week would be, you know, basically interviews, you know, walkthroughs, you know, at the schools with the individuals that are responsible for the student activity management. And then the balance of the engagement would be to do, you know, testing and further review. So in terms of their availability, they said that, you know, they can be engaged and start within a couple of weeks after they're engaged to do the internal review. Jeff Ziplow was the lead, but also from CLA was Lindsay Donato, and you know, the two of them would be the individuals that would be conducting this internal review. So, you know, that kind of gives an overview of what the discussion was, and really it's a question to the board on how you want to proceed at this point in time.
Okay, that's great news. So Vin, do you know, do we have the authority to engage the auditors to do this audit, or do we need to approach town council to get them to engage the auditors to do the audit?
I believe that the Board of Ed can, you know, can arrange to have this done, and the report would ultimately go back to the Board of Education. This doesn't have to be a town initiative at all.
Great. So, Mr. Chair, I ask you, do we need to, can we make a motion, or what would be the?
There's no motion on the agenda for this. So two things. So here's what I suggest. So Vincent, thank you for following up on this. I just want to refresh the board and those that are watching very briefly what this is. So I know for board members recall last school year, just before the pandemic and the finance committee meeting, we were talking about this and moving it forward. It came to the full board for a vote to move forward, but we didn't know what it was going to cost or the scope of services. COVID hit, and you know, this was put on the back burner, some other things. Well, it's important, it's not that important. Here we are, trying to get this resurrected again, and the question of who pays for it's come up. We can certainly pay for it, certainly if money is available. So my question would be, do we have the budget to do this? It seemed to me that, well, we being the audit firm do this, it seemed to me that the summer months probably the best time because there's less noise going on and, you know, less impact. And if we don't have the funds, I have no problem asking the town if they can give us some, but I don't know if that's necessary. And ultimately, it's not a forensics transaction, it's process, because we have policy number 3453, which is 25 years old. And if any board member actually read that policy, you know why we have to update it. So the sooner we do this, the better we can address this next school year and get that policy refined. So I would suggest, you know, maybe have our next meeting, or maybe the year-end meeting, or whatever's coming up next. Let's have a vote on this and get it done. And the question I have is, Vin, do we have to vote on a $12,000 expenditure?
You don't have to vote on the expenditure, right? You know, what I could do is just encumber the $12,000, and we do have that availability. So I would suggest that, I know our next business meeting is actually June 3rd. I would think that you would want to vote on the engagement of CLA to provide the review of student activity. And I didn't mention this, but one of their starting points will be to take the current student activity policy and regulation, and that they will use that to determine, are we compliant with the regulation? And then they'll give us what are the best practices that aren't included in our current policy and regulation.
Yeah, and that's the whole point of this. Again, Jeff, Ben, and I, we've talked about this on and off the school year. There were deficits. We're going to approach it timing, but so let's plan for the June 3rd meeting. When the agenda is being drafted, I'll remind us to have it on there and get it done, and we can head into the next school year with, if there are any recommendations, we can modify that policy and be done with it, because that is the very last policy, I believe, that has to be revised, and hopefully that stops us from touching policies for a while. The one thing I will add on this is I have a long history relationship with Bloom CLR, Jeff in particular, in the private sector. In fact, many assessments financially and technically. So when it comes to a vote, I'm gonna have to abstain myself. Not that I don't support it, but just for, but I will say that they are more than capable.
Yeah, it was a good conversation with him and Lindsay, and I've certainly felt comfortable that they have the wherewithal to get through this review.
Good. I'm sorry, Ann. That's all I had.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the enlightenment there. So good to see that we'll be able to move, at least attempt to move forward on this. And I did have the opportunity to read that policy, and it feels very familiar to me. Of course, my finance degree was from 1996, right around the time that policy was made. So I'm guessing there was probably a lot of changes since then. So I'm happy to hear that we have the potential to have the firm come in and really do a great assessment on that, so that we know for the next 25 years that we'll be have a great set of policies and procedures for our student volunteers and parent volunteers who do a lot of the work in those student activity accounts. So
based on my experience, I'm hopeful that what's going to come out of this is it'll give the board facts to potentially help Vincent and his team perhaps upgrade software and put things that help make their jobs more efficient, and it could be an impetus for our budget next year. So I think there'll be some good that comes out of this.
are there any comments or questions on this section? Tim, I saw you wrote comment, but I don't know when that was in reference to.
Just now. Yeah, no, okay. I think this is really important. This review of the financial accounts, what is it, $1 million balance typically that's in there, $1 million or $1.5 million or something like that?
Across all the schools, it's about $1 million, yes.
Okay, yeah. And it's, from what I recall, what you said is the board has no responsibility for this. I don't know if that's the right wording, but whatever the right wording is, it's important to me, because I have a feeling that if something ever did go wrong, the voters would look at the board and say, what's going on? I think we should have a better idea. And then also, I just want to add the sports part of it and coaching permits. That's something that Jeff had even mentioned, I think it was last September, just keeping that sort of in the same conversation in terms of the audits, not to get into a discussion about it, but just to mention that too.
So two different things. I don't know if we're going to talk about it tonight, but the other audits under policy, so that's probably forthcoming. I just want to clarify something. As board members, I encourage you, I know we always have professional development opportunities, but it is the board's responsibility to adhere to the policy concerning student activities accounts. We are the ones responsible for the upkeep of those accounts to meet the policy. What the not responsible means is we don't dip into those accounts to pay for operational other that's controlled by the administrators and schools. But CABE, state regulation, our policy, we're responsible to ensure that those processes are being followed for those accounts. We don't spend the money as we shouldn't, just so we're clear.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If there's no further comment, then I guess we can move on to the report on grant activity.
Actually, Marlene is going to cover that. Marlene, if you want, I could share my screen to show the information. It's up to you.
Sounds good.
All right.
And everyone has this in their linked agenda as well. So this is the grant report for this current year. The total grant awards last year were $1,591,276. This year is a little over 2 million. So I'll start with the consolidated grants and just sort of give you an overview of what we use some of this funding for. So Title I, we use that to pay for, can everyone see it? Is everybody, I don't want to rush ahead too fast.
Yes.
These funds cover reading and math support personnel, some instructional assistants, and materials to support struggling learners. In Title II, that pays for salaries and supplies for reading teachers and reading support personnel. Title III, that money supports the things that we do for our English learners. That includes professional development for our teachers. We typically, although it changes from year to year, work with a consultant at ACES to provide professional development for our teachers who have English learners in their classrooms. Title IV, that this year is paying for the summer curriculum writing training that about 70 or so of our teachers will be getting at the end of the school year, and has also will be used next year to pay for NGSS PD that was unable to occur this year due to substitutes and just the whole COVID pandemic, our ability to do that. Let's see, the Perkins Grant. I think you are familiar with that. We've had Sean McEwen report on some of the ways in which we use that money. The enhancement grant is used to purchase some manufacturing equipment, its training, its equipment, etc. The Career and Technical Education Department, which includes business, and our, I'm losing the name, but our Family Consumer Science and Tech Ed departments really supports a lot of their curriculum changes, etc. The IDEA grant Vin has alluded to before, and he spoke to a little bit earlier about special education, pays for a lot of staffing needs and helps with supplies. Open Choice Grant is typically used for IA support. Adult Education pays for both training, publicizing materials, applications, and supplies. You've heard us speak a lot about the Peck Jones Grant, which this year paid for reading texts and previously had paid for NGSS training. Smart Start, the Smart Start preschool, that pays for salaries and employee benefits. And Vin really went into some detail earlier about the ESSER money and how that's used with the CARES Act, and also the ESSER 2 funds that we're using. That's the thumbnail sketch if you have any questions.
Are there any questions? I don't see anyone in the chat here. Okay, Marlene, thank you. Well, actually, I'll ask one question. The IDEA grants, are those state grants?
Federal.
Yeah.
Federal, okay. Is everything basically federal that we're
Federal
looking at there?
and managed by the state.
Oh, through block grant or some other form. Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Oh, I lost my microphone. There we go. Okay. Seeing no other questions or comments, and Marlene, I don't think you had anything additional to add. Then that concludes the Finance Committee report, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Adam. Up next is Planning Committee. Andrew.
Good evening, all. Since our last meeting, we've had 2 planning committee meetings. I'm going to do a recap for the benefit of all of us and for those who are home who have not heard and did not watch the meeting. We had a planning committee meeting of the whole on the 29th. At the meeting, the first item that was discussed were capital improvement projects that are scheduled for this summer. I'm going to run through these quick for those listening at home. Over at Doolittle School, there'll be bathroom renovations, underground storage tank removal, and boiler replacement, as well as main entrance and step replacement outside of the school gymnasium and some classroom renovations site-wide. Over at Cheshire High School, the ADA door replacement project that was put on hold last summer is going to get underway this summer, as well as some security upgrades and the Thorpe Auditorium trophy showcase replacement, as well as underground storage tank removal. That's about it at Cheshire High. Over at Highland School, boiler replacement, security, various classroom and select window and millwork replacements. Norton School, there was going to be the kitchen modernization project, which was scheduled to take place, which was reported at the meeting, but has since been put on hold till next summer by the town council. At Dodd, HVAC replacement, roof repairs, acoustic tile replacement in some of the select classrooms, and sidewalk enhancements in the exterior. And all these projects were previously approved capital projects by the district. Any questions by board members on the first part of that meeting? I know we heard all this collectively, but for those listening at home, they might not have seen this. So seeing none. Second item that was discussed, which was the extension to Performance Environmental's contract for 2021-2022. Performance has been in our school system since 2014. They performed excellent service throughout the pandemic, as reported by Vin and others in the district. The increase for the contract is a $38,000 increase, or 5.3% over the existing contract. And this is reflected because of minimum wage increases, as well as the increase in cleaning supply costs to the company. Because of some savings there, though, the net increase to the district the net contract will be $700,910. That motion did pass 6-1. There was one abstention, which was Faith. And Tim and Faith both asked Vin to go back to Performance about potentially doing, instead of it being a 1-year contract extension, being a 2-year contract extension, or potentially going back out to bid. So I think Vin has reached out to Performance and has an update on that.
Just very quickly, yes, I did speak to the president of the company, and I do expect to bring forth a proposal at the June 3rd board meeting. So we are negotiating if there will be some kind of a price break if we extend to the second year. So it will be 21-22 is already approved by the board. If we extend to 22-23, what would that look like? So more information to follow next business meeting.
All right, great. Thank you, Vin. The third item that was discussed at the planning meeting on the 29th was the school modernization and what those next steps were to be or should be. We talked about having a series of public outreach to kind of gauge the community, to kind of explain to where we are with the process. I have more information on that under the school modernization, but essentially, since that meeting, there's been an approval of a contract extension for Colliers by the town council for an additional $25,000 to help guide the next steps for school modernization, but more under school modernization later on in the agenda. Any questions on the meeting on the 29th by any of the board members before I move on to the May 6th meeting? Seeing none. On May 6th, we had a presentation. Vin actually ran the presentation from ECG Engineering, who's our consultant. Unfortunately, Michael Sam, who's been working on assessing the district and potential solar installations, fell ill and was unable to be at that meeting. So Catherine, Tim, and I, as well as Vin and Mr. Clavette and Mr. Bombero from the town, were all on that call. Essentially, we walked through the different sites and potential ground mount installations, no roof mount at any of the sites, any of the buildings in the district. focused mostly on, we looked at a lot of different ones, but the ones that we really focused on were carports over at Highland School, essentially along the border between the police station and the front of the school, and then also Doolittle along the driveway coming in off of Oak Avenue. I have my own opinion on it. We went through and looked at the different potential installations, and then from there, it was decided that we would look at to see what installation we can do and what would have the greatest benefit to the district. Catherine had suggested potentially putting on RFP to kind of take a look into that. And then Vin actually had a site walk yesterday with our energy consultant. So Vin, do you want to touch on how that turned out yesterday?
Yes, so the week following the planning committee meeting at direction of planning committee, I did contact JK Energy Solutions, and they've done, two pretty significant projects in our schools to upgrade the LED lighting, and so we're 99% LED lit now in all our schools. And I reached out to them, and as it turns out, they do have quite a bit of experience with solar projects. And so the upshot of the site visit yesterday, we walked at the site at Highland where we would potentially install a carport solar array, and also at Doolittle School. They're going to come back to us very quickly within the next week or so with a total cost to install those solar arrays. Again, solar carports, so they would cover a portion of the parking, and provide some protection from the elements. They will show us how much electricity would be generated from those solar arrays. And also, more importantly, they will show us what a 20-year power purchase agreement would look like and what our cost, per kilowatt would be if we entered into this 20-year agreement, which is important because you'll know financially what that array at Highland and what that array at Doolittle, would generate in terms of electricity, and either electricity savings because the cost is lower than we could buy on the commercial market, or if the cost is higher than the commercial market, what the investment would be, to have those arrays installed. So, the good news is we'll have a financial sense, within the next week or so, and whether or not we'll go forward with an application through the ZREC program will be something that the planning committee will determine. So what I envision happening is when I get the information, pass it along to the planning committee, and the planning committee can decide if they want to have a meeting to take it to the next step.
And that application is due June 14th, correct?
It's due June 14th, and these gentlemen from JK Energy explained that they could certainly do all the prep work, submit the application. There's no cost to submit the application. There's also no obligation with that application being submitted. So, again, I think it's a question of what do the financials look like, and do we want to go this route? There's also, as Tim had mentioned during the planning committee meeting, that's only if we do an installation that's over a certain size, that June 14th date applies. If it's smaller than a certain size, then you actually don't have a deadline. They're taking application. There's not really a process. It's on a rolling basis. So it's a lot more complicated than I could articulate, but we're, following the request, that came out of the last planning committee meeting.
Great, thank you.
And I think we look at the aesthetics of what's installed along with the finance, and does it fit the character of the school and the environment? These are all, there's a lot to obviously be evaluated in that process.
Absolutely. I see Adam, question?
Yeah, so I'm guessing in all of this analysis, had you chosen maybe you had mentioned already the sites where these solar panels would go, or these carports would go, was it along that, like, I'll call it for Highland, would it be the property that lines up along the police station?
Yeah,
Kind of where they built theirs?
Yep, so here you go. So here it is.
Oh.
Yeah, so this is this is Highland. That's the front of Highland. right?
Yep.
That's the cafeteria, right where your cursor is.
Yeah, and there's the array. Now, again, this is not final. This was what our consultant from ECG had put forth. So that's Highland. And then let me just show you Doolittle.
Yep, there you go.
Okay, so this is Cornwall, right?
Yes.
And this is the sidewalk. There's a sidewalk beneath this, array. So it would be from somewhere as you enter the driveway to Doolittle, moving towards the school. So this array we talked about would cover the sidewalk as well as the first row of car parking along that sidewalk.
So just from a practical point of view, two questions. Firstly, just looking at where the one for Doodle is, do we know, would they be impervious to foul balls coming off of the baseball fields? As I'm sure quite a few come down over there. And then the second,
we did, I'll just answer that. We did talk about that. These are designed to withstand, impact, like they'll survive a hailstorm. The way a ball would typically travel, it would just skip right off the top of the solar cell. So the power purchase agreement essentially would mean we don't own these. A third party company owns them and would be responsible, for the maintenance, and if one breaks, then they'd be responsible for the replacement.
yeah, they're essentially sort of leasing our land, right? So then the second question is, in your estimation, Vin, if we were to say do renovations on Doolittle School, which area would you estimate that heavy equipment would have to enter from? From the same area, or where we'd put those up, or from the drive that comes off of Oak?
Listen, that's certainly one of the key considerations that the planning committee talked about. And the planning committee can speak to it, but that is, concern. Are these installations, these sites were selected because we think it would have the least impact. Right now we do believe, based on discussion, that we would keep Doolittle School and we would keep Highland. So, but that is, certainly one of the questions. That's a great question. I think we could still get heavy equipment into the site if we installed this one at Doolittle, but there's plenty of consideration and thought that has to go into making the decision ultimately.
Okay.
And Adam, so we're looking to see what this is going to cost and what the benefit is going to be. So we've reviewed several larger installs, one notably in the backfield of Highland Elementary School, and we decided, although it would generate 80% of the power for the facility, we would lose the rear field and it would encroach on the outdoor classroom and take away from the aesthetic of the pond. And there's just so many other issues that, at what point are we encumbering so much of the property for power generation, and will it make sense financially, right? So
Sure.
And also notable, and Tim, don't kill me, it's it's a 20-year deal. And if you watch how much things change in 20 years, like me, I graduated from high school 20 years ago. There's.
No, you didn't. No way.
What we don't want to be stuck with is 20 years from now, people pulling into Highland Elementary School saying, what the heck is that thing? And what was that put there, as well as for Doolittle School? So we're on it. We're assessing, see what it's going to come out. And the next planning committee meeting, we'll have another report to report back to the full board. So
looking forward to it. Thank you.
Tim?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I've tried to do a little bit more research on this, and when we met, the planning committee met, my view is that if we can save money, that we need to consider. I said that the incentives are different, smaller. The incentives and the ultimate cost savings for the schools would probably be better with smaller arrays. And when I say a smaller array, just so people at home can visualize this, it's 100 kW 100 kilowatts of power, and you could sort of say that's like 300 solar panels. So it's a big stretch, but you probably could do that in that stretch along Highland, adjacent to the police department. What I've come to realize based on the last conversation that we had, we probably would want to have decking, more raw materials for the solar array, because snow lands on it, it melts, it falls through cracks. We don't want that. That turns into ice and it may not go away for months. Anyway, that decking costs more money. So that increases the cost of any installation, but it's borne out or better distributed in a larger array because there are certain fixed costs. As an example, you have to have a cement truck come to do a construction site. The cost of getting the truck there is it's basically a fixed cost. It's not the cement going in the ground, but getting it there for a day is basically a fixed cost. So to a certain extent, it may actually make sense economically to do a larger array with lower incentives. That may ultimately give us a bigger price. That may not work for any of the locations at the schools. Nonetheless, I do think getting more information about it, besides just what I'm saying here, I think it'd be good. I think it'd be worthwhile to just continue exploring this without making any commitments.
Right, and that's exactly. Hopefully, we'll have that information back from Vin, from ECG shortly. Correct? They're from JK Energy. I mean,
Yes, they've committed to do this very quickly for us.
great. And what, Tim's, for those of you who didn't hear the planning committee meeting, there is an array at Cheshire Police Station, and it is not a continuous deck. And so what I've heard from friends who are on the police force is they're very unhappy with that install, because what's happening is the snow is melting off those solar panels, coming down, the sun's not hitting it, and it's just creating an ice skating rink out there in the wintertime. So they wish that they designed that one a little bit different. And so what we're trying to do is avoid that if we are going to do an install of a carport at Highland or Doolittle School. So with that, that concludes my update on the planning committee, unless there's any other questions.
Anne had a comment, I believe.
Anne?
Yeah, I really love the idea of solar. I just think that we're trying to get a 20-year school modernization plan going, and it just seems to me to make the most sense to incorporate the solar part of it as we are working on the schools and updating them in general. But I'm really glad that we're doing the research now and getting some idea of what could go wrong. And it strikes me looking at those maps and the blue splotches where the solar panels are. It's a lot of area, and I'm concerned with how it's going to make all of the properties look aesthetically. So I'm glad we're looking into it carefully.
Yes, we sure are. So thank you. Okay, that concludes the planning committee update. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I'll just add that as part of SMC, as part of our modernization plan, I think when we do designs, we're certainly going to incorporate green energy and solar. So there's opportunities there at the very least. So keep that in mind. That being said, we're going to move on to policy. Adam, it is back to you again.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We had a policy meeting on May 4th, 2021, where we, for a first reading, reviewed our student health services policy number 5141, where Dr. Solon noted that this policy will need to be reviewed again in the future because of recent rulings regarding mandatory vaccinations and the elimination of the religious exemption, but also that our district nurse coordinator, boy, I'm missing the entire thing. Let's see, hold on. I'm missing the change. Hold on a second. Dr. Solon, can you remind me? Because I'm missing it here. Why we? Oh,
The budget.
this is for sports
Right.
physicals, right? Okay. So we discussed many weighty issues that could also be affected, that could also affect this policy. But the main reason why we were reviewing this policy was that we were going to change the policy so that students could have a sports physical for, I believe, up to was it for 13 months? Was that correct?
Yeah, the marquee piece of this is that yes, but we're requiring sports physicals that last the entirety of the season. So a student would have to have a physical that would last them to the entire season. Oftentimes we were finding, not oftentimes, but there was a concern about physicals lapsing in the middle of the season and then that not being caught, which creates problems, a medical potential liability for the player, a legal liability for us, and a real headache for the parent mid-season, or problem for the team if the child's got to sit because they don't have a physical. So we're really just trying to make sure that all of our student athletes have been evaluated for the full season.
Yes. And so we had a discussion about that, and it was unanimously moved for a first reading. Next, we moved policy number 6159, instruction, individualized education programs / special education program, for a second reading. And this is where we changed the age according to state statute of students receiving special education from up until their 21st birthday to up until their 22nd birthday. And we moved that for a second reading with no changes. Finally, we moved many policies for a third and final reading. And I have I'd like to make a motion for that, if I may. Move that the Cheshire Board of Education give a third and final reading to policies 3170, budget implementation, 3300, expenditures, expending authority, purchasing guides, policy number 3326, paying for goods and services, policy 3326.1, business - payroll procedures and authorized signatures, policy 3541.45, student transportation insurance, and direct the superintendent to put said policies into immediate effect. Do I have a second on that? Anyone?
Second.
Yeah.
I missed the. Who was the
I'll be
second
the
on
third.
that? Kat, who was the
Tim
second
White.
on it?
Tim White.
Tim, thank you, Tim. Okay. Is there any discussion on those policies? Perhaps just for review, I believe that was just changes in titles. They're antiquated titles for, I believe, the business officers, especially Vin Massiana's title and some other titles that work in his office. Is there any other further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion as read? It is unanimous. Thank you. Let's check the rest here. I believe that concludes my report, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Adam. And I just want to thank the policy committee for helping get the third and final reading of the policies done this year. And actually, all the work the policy committee does, and I'm sure just about everyone, well, pretty soon will have served on policy, but for those that have, that the folks may not know, a lot of work happens there between the administration and legal teams, just keeping up to speed with changes to state regulations, which seems to be endless. And the work this committee does, it's a lot of work. So thank you. That being said, we're moving on to another very important committee, which is the School Monetization Committee update.
All right, thank you so much. So big thanks to the town council. Obviously, they know how important this is to the community, and they extended Colliers, who is our consultant's contract, by an additional $25,000 that was approved at their meeting on May the 12th. So we're waiting for a date to have a kickoff meeting as to next steps with that. It's going to be a joint meeting between certain members of this board as well as the town council. One of the major items that we need to do is the test fits for the properties, as we discussed at our planning committee meeting back in April. So that needs to be done. That will not be done by Colliers, but that will be done by another consultant, but overseen by Colliers with collaboration between all parties. I did just receive some late breaking news from Superintendent Solon that Colliers is going to be scheduling a series of community engagement events, or sessions rather, about school modernization, the process where we are today, before school gets out, which I know is something that we all desperately want to do before people start going on much needed vacations after the pandemic. So those are going to be on evenings on June the 7th, June the 8th, and June the 9th. That's the only details I have on that. Jeff, I don't know if you have any additional information on those.
I do. I have them here in my update for a little later.
All right. Do you want to just hold on to it? Okay.
Yeah. 7th, 9th.
But I guess most importantly is that Colliers is working. We're on it to get this, to keep the momentum going and moving forward. I don't know if anyone has saw on Monday, I've started a series of Facebook posts, cross posts on all the different social media outlets called Modernization Monday, where I'm going to be sharing the 68-page document, and every Monday around noon time, putting it out there, paragraph and a half, just touching on various points to try to get some interaction. I could post a picture of my daughter playing the trombone and get 300 likes. I posted it, I got about 13. So feel free to share that. Feel free to reach out to me. I'd be happy to have anyone's assistance on that. To try to get some people talking. I mean, we're talking a huge, potentially the largest capital expenditure ever coming to the town. So I'm thinking about next time leading off with Panera's coming to Cheshire, and see if maybe that will start more people being interested in the post. It's just a little bit of a joke, but
Andrew, just tag each of us on the board.
Will do. Yes, that's it. Yeah. I should have done that the first time, Ann, and that's a great suggestion. So I'm going to do that, and I'm going to just keep it very simple in these posts. And so this one, it was just school modernization. What is this all about? And it's just a paragraph and a half about where we were and where we're going. And then next week, I'm going to just highlight the preferred option. And then the following week, I'm going to do the secondary option, and then just kind of keep it like that. So hopefully people will read that. And so when it comes down to a few months from now, people don't say they know nothing about it. So
don't get me wrong, Andrew, I'm all about using your children as fonts for.
Well,
let's get some puppies and kittens too.
Whatever we can do to get the word out there, you know. And I've seen people, and I've talked to people in the community at the wonderful band concert that they held outside of Dodd the other day. I was talking to a group of parents, and they had no idea. And so I said, I know we're friends on Facebook. Go on there and click on the link, because it is a 68-page document, but really there's about 15 to 16 pages that you have to actually read. And then all the backup is there for any questions that you may have. So if anyone's home listening to this, I know it's late and you have a lot of things on your plate, but just please take a minute to read the report.
Thank you, Andrew. We're all chuckling because in the comments, Dr. Solon posted, to be fair, Savannah is an excellent trombone player. So
I appreciate it. The golden retriever does not agree, but I do.
Yeah, and again, this is just an attempt to get the word out there. Some board members asked, hey, we have a communications committee. we rarely use. We can start up throughout the course of this as we move forward. And of course, we'll look at that. The other thing, I just want to be careful, even though we're maybe tagging these posts, we have to be mindful that it can't turn into a legal meeting by commenting. So we get a quorum on there, could be an issue, but certainly, hey, chime in if you see 3 or less board members and, share where you can. I try to share them. And, I was quipping earlier, maybe, Andrew, you got to start off with you're putting a new medical building on Route 10 or another drugstore. Or,
Yeah, so I said Panera. I said Panera's coming to Cheshire, and then put the link for the school modernization.
Walmart, a school closing tends to get people attention. I quit, but thank you for being proactive on that.
Yeah, definitely.
I think Tim has a question.
Tim?
Yeah, this is probably a question for Marlene or Vin. I don't see Jeff here right now. Do we have, so I mean, I want outreach to the whole town. Everybody votes on this townwide referendum, but at the same time, a smaller subset. I'm thinking preschool. Do you have a connection with any of the preschools where it would be appropriate to let them know about the meetings?
We will definitely make everybody in the community aware of the meetings. These are just the locations scheduled for the meetings. And to be fair, Darcy's probably not space-wise and location-wise the best location to hold it, but we will definitely notify everybody.
So to be clear, I'm not talking about preschool at Darcy. I'm talking about, Doodlebugs.
Oh, community. Oh yeah, certainly. Yeah, we have great connections with all of those private providers. We will definitely, we can get information out to them, no problem.
Okay. I think that could be a good thing. Okay.
Yeah, that's a good suggestion.
Thanks. Thank you.
Adam?
Oh yeah, I don't know. I was just wondering if we had a Twitter account or Instagram, to get to all the folks of all different ages and all that stuff. Or if we were just going on Facebook, because if I recall, your post was on the education forum, which I don't think is shareable.
It's on the education forum, my personal one, Cheshire Community Forum, and Cheshire Unplugged.
Oh, okay. So, all right. So if you do tag us, then we can share on our personal accounts at that point, right?
Yeah.
If we get tagged in it. Okay. Okay. Facebook lesson. Yay.
So Jeff, I know the district does. I don't know. I mean, I'm happy if you guys want to put it on the district social media. I don't know how all that works.
So Jeff, I just realized part of your job role now is influencer. You're a social media influencer.
Hey,
Right
can
up my alley.
ad revenue from that?
It's like stupid human tricks from David Letterman, now available online. We'll do what we got to do.
So, if there's no other questions, that concludes school modernization update.
Thank you, Andrew. I do want to add, I had a chance to talk to Andrew and Vin and Jeff and a couple colleagues in the town council. The town council is wrapping up their budget, I think this week, if not tonight. I forget the timing of it. So I know they're going to start ramping back up on this next week, starting with the preferred option, and they're doing some analysis there, and we're doing our analysis. So, we all thought it makes sense if we got together, small group, and talk about how to move forward. I think we all recognize that, as we talked about last time, kind of be good to know what land is available, and that may actually dictate how we proceed forward. So, and then we'll have a broader combined meeting with both bodies right after that as we move forward. So thanks, Jeff and team, for helping move this forward. And hopefully we get the community engaged as June comes and the summer days are here. But thank you. Moving on, we are going to correspondence. Madam Secretary, do we have any correspondence?
We do not have any correspondence, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Seeing there's no correspondence, we're going to move on to the much anticipated superintendent's report.
Again, thank you, Tony. I know this is the highlight of every board member's month in their service to the board, my report. We may not have correspondence, but I did receive an email through the COVID hotline. Tricia Rowald was asking about the 80-minute periods at Cheshire High School, whether or not that would eliminate the need for science labs. It will, an extra period scheduled for science labs. And the short answer is yes. Dr. Gadd, I know, will put that in her correspondence out to the community. In most cases, the answer is yes. For AP and some advanced ECE coursework, there will be additional lab periods, but thank you for the great question, and we'll get that information out. I hate to start on a solemn note, but this past week or two, we saw the passing of two prominent Cheshire Public Schools former educators. One is Judy DiDemizio. She was a Cheshire Public Schools Teacher of the Year, actually, in 1991. And Dr. Jim Trefone was a longstanding biology teacher who I had the pleasure of working with at Cheshire High School. And both of them lost their battle with cancer recently. And I know our hearts and our deep sympathies and prayers go out to both the Trefone and DiDemizio families, both also residents of Cheshire. So shifting gears to our usual more enthusiastic presentation, I will try and be as quick as I can with you here. There we go. Let's see. To just run you through the report. You've seen this before. COVID, it's kind of a long-standing slide for us going through the process, but you haven't seen numbers like this in a long time. These are our current COVID impact on the school district. Of course, the vast majority of our staff are vaccinated, so limited quarantine issues. Now more of our students are vaccinated. Not fully yet, so we anticipate that number to come down once they are fully vaccinated. But even now, the student quarantines are quite low on that bottom line relative to what we had seen. Well, we acknowledged in a meeting a couple of months ago the emotional impact of COVID-19 and my real trepidation that we had 700 students who could potentially have not stepped foot in a school building for 17 months if they didn't return before next year. And so in January, if you recall, we had 1,000 remote learners, 25% of our student body. In April, when I recently was reporting, we had 740. And our team was very diligent about reaching out to families, encouraging them to return. We're down to 497 or 12%. So kudos to our administrative team and for reaching out, encouraging families to come back, and they've done so. And I'm excited that the more students that we can get to kind of reacclimate to school before they return next year, I think the better off that they will be. Spring events, I know, we've heard about a variety of things from our student reps and whatnot. The Dodd trip will be departing next Wednesday. I'm very excited to be going on that trip with the minor reservation about cicadas. But other than that, I'm excited to go. Sports have been fantastic this spring, as you heard from our student reps. The promotions, K-8 will be slightly scaled back a little bit different. For example, Vin, Marlene, and I typically travel to each one because of the scheduling and being a little bit different. I'm looking forward to doing a video for our 6th grade promotions. Our 8th grade promotion, I will be in person for the morning of Monday, the 14th, I believe it is, of June. And that will be held at Cheshire High School. The high school graduation ceremony, I did mention earlier in the meeting that we met this morning with Maura Esposito from Chairperson. She reviewed our plan and gave us the endorsement. It'll be held outside, 6 p.m. June 16th. One ceremony for all students. Everybody will receive 4 tickets, every graduate, and that will provide seating on the field. There will be additional seating in the stands, but you can't have access to the field without a ticket if you're not a graduate. Masks are required for the event unless you're on stage, so students walking across the stage will not be required to wear a mask. In the event of inclement weather, we will be holding a ceremony inside with details to follow. And then, you know, the all-night grad party will follow that event, or the graduation, whether indoors or outdoors. So just to provide a quick visual on how this ceremony will look, this is the stage at the north end of the field where our teams generally enter that north end. This is closest to the high school, with the baseball fields being over here. So our students will enter. This is the stage. These are 12-foot aisles that you see, the 12 feet in width. And our students here in red are graduates. These are all parent seats with a Jumbotron here for enhanced viewing. Behind the stage, this will be musical performers, students, and then our staff are aligning on either side of the field. So more to come on this. We're very excited to be able to go in a more traditional format. What you'll notice is each seat is set about 4.5 feet apart on center. So we could have clustered them in groups of 4 or something like that. But we didn't want to have empty seats necessarily. You know, if my party only had 2 in it, you know, we don't want 2 empty seats just taking up space. We want people seated as close to the front as we can. And so that is our current arrangement. CPS vaccination progress. Just another shout out, to Maura Esposito and the team at Cheshire. We've vaccinated now more than 500 employees. We had 100 students, 16 to 18, receive their second dose at Cheshire High today. Many of our 16 to 18-year-olds have been vaccinated through other means. By the time the state allowed us to run the clinic, many of our students already had been vaccinated. We vaccinated approximately 500 students aged 12 to 15 already last weekend, and they're slated to get their second dose on June 15th. And if you're curious, the state has developed a vaccination website, and I can show you the most at least to me, the most interesting part. If you come down here and hover over Cheshire, you can see that 67.9% of residents aged 15 to 44 years old have received at least 1 dose of the vaccine. And of our 45 to 64-year-old population, 76% of our population has received that vaccine. And so that was updated on May 18th. They update these things weekly generally. So you can always check back for more information. I'm a regular, if you will, on the site. Anyway, so some CPS highlights this week. I know Lucy mentioned my jump roping. There's actual proof of that. I am a bit of a double Dutch master amongst other things. And then one of the real highlights of the week, and I appreciate Andrew and Ann attending our school business partnership meeting earlier this week, where we had the real pleasure to recognize Jill Silverman and Jason Vanese. They are the leadership team at Richard Chevrolet. They are so deserving of the Connecticut Association to Schools Distinguished Friend of Education Award for their tireless work with our school system. They are always there to answer the call whenever we ask for anything, and oftentimes they just offer. But my favorite project we've done with them is a couple of years ago at Dodd Middle School. We had 2 different groups design vehicles from start to finish. Jason worked with them. He usually does the design and ordering. He worked with them. They designed classes, or designed 2 different cars. They marketed the vehicles, and then the winner, the group got a pizza party, whichever vehicle sold first. And Jason made a very funny comment the other day about the fact that it was kind of humbling. He's the person who designs and orders the vehicles, and our kids did just as well as he did, if not better. So it was funny for him to share that with the group. But he and Jill deserve all the credit in the world for what they do for our kids and our community. So thank you to Richard Chevrolet. As Andrew had mentioned, we do have 3 engagement sessions scheduled, and we will, upon your blessing, publicize these broadly. I know that you're certainly comfortable with us publicizing them, but just want to make sure the dates and everything are okay for you. June 7th, 8th, and 9th, not that this is a required, all of these are required for all of the board members, but you know, if our plan is to try and follow this. We wanted to vary the locations and the times a little bit to provide some flexibility for families. And so we have Monday the 7th at 6 p.m. at Norton, Tuesday the 8th at 6:30 at Chapman, and Wednesday the 9th at 7 p.m. at Dodd Middle School. So that concludes my superintendent's report. And certainly I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody may have. Andrew?
Just on the forms, we don't know what the program is yet. For those that are listening, that's to be determined.
So the program will be an overview of where we are to date,
Right.
and what our next steps will be. Basically, what has the school modernization committee done in the last year and change that they've been working? And so we'll hit the real highlights. It'll be bring you up to speed so that when you read the Monday modernization minute, you're connecting with that. It makes a lot of sense to you.
Perfect. Thank you.
Anne, I know you had a question.
Yeah, I'm wondering if there's a way to see those forums, will they be live streamed or something if you, or do you have to go in person?
Well, I know that unfortunately, you know, we mentioned earlier that Mike Salamini wasn't available today. I know Mr. Perugini mentioned that. So I will have to confer with him about how we might be able to record these things. We're likely to hold them outside under tents, and that's another variable that Mike would have to, you know, manage. And certainly, you know, being there in person is great, but we want to be able to provide access to the same information for those who can't be.
Thank you.
Sure.
I believe Tim had a question. And
Yeah. Yeah, thanks for the tent possibility. And I'll say, I mean, if not all 3 of these get televised, if it just becomes too complicated, I'm not that concerned about it. I mean, my feeling is we just want to offer as much opportunity to the public in general. I mean, if they're all televised, that would be great. If they're not, you know, one would be great. My goal is to just offer people. I haven't heard from people nearly as much as I wish I had in the past year for obvious reasons, and this is an important topic. So I just want to give people the chance to come talk, yell at us if we're doing something wrong, whatever it might be. With regard to the COVID vaccines, so you're basically, as far as you're concerned, basically any of the kids who've gotten them or their families or parents want them, they've probably gotten them at this point. If the age drops, goes further down to 9, 6, whatever, over the summer, do you think you'd be doing some outreach to parents, even in anticipation of school opening, you know, in September?
Right. We've been incredibly committed to working with Chairperson to provide access to vaccines, because we believe it increases the likelihood that kids can attend school, and it improves the general welfare and safety of our community. And so that's not going to change over the summer. The only thing that would perhaps be a bit of an impediment for us as a school system offering them in our buildings is construction work. So if there's abatement, by law, under 18, you can't be in the building. So we'd have to work through that, but we would certainly offer clinics in conjunction with Chairperson if they had the capacity to do so. But to your point, I mean, there's so much availability now through a multitude of resources that the state may opt to go in that direction. In that case, it's out of our hands.
Okay. Okay. And then my last point, grad party donations, they're looking for them. They didn't have much time to fundraise, so that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think it's Adam.
Thank you. Firstly, Jeff, was that you in the picture jumping rope?
I know it. Yes. Hard to believe. That was not a Photoshop.
That was because that looked like you had a good 2 to 3 feet vertical there.
I can elevate
know.
that. Yeah.
Wow, impressive, impressive. I guess secondly, on the outdoor meetings, I know I've noticed just from like just seeing teachers in action, a lot of times when they do a video stream, they just use a laptop and turn the camera around for remote students. I saw that with my own son when he had to isolate a while back. And I don't know if it could just be a simple solution of having an internet source and just doing a low res stream, because I don't know how good the audio would be, but that could be just if it's a real technical challenge, that it could be something as simple as that, I guess.
I've been told the worse the resolution, the better I look, but I still think it's a great idea to have Mike be there if we can do it, like you said, for the audio.
Sure.
And so we'll see what we can do.
Yeah. And lastly, if I recall, the governor's executive orders, at least this time, are set to expire in July. And if vaccines are extended down to potentially 2 years old, is there a possibility that we would have to make a decision on masks, on our students wearing masks? Or is that just going to be, we just won't have to worry about it? There will be no masks next year.
Yeah, I would not rule out the possibility. I think right now our intense focus is on the next 20 days or so for our students. But I think when we retool and get ready for August, we'll follow a very similar process that we did this year, and that's engage our health professionals, listen to the data and information from DPH, and collaboratively with our families and our health professionals, try and establish a plan that makes sense for the school system. And so the state may require them. I don't know. But like I said, we're committed to continuing to work with that group to make a decision that's best for our community.
Great. Thank you.
Unless I'm missing someone, is anyone any other questions for Dr. Solon's superintendent report? Seeing as there are none, I just want to take a moment to give the board the condolences to Julie DeMizio and Mr. Trafone. I know since I've been on the board, I've always heard great praise for them both. And I didn't come through Cheshire school system, but to this day, I still hear from past students and some of this board on their contributions. So please accept our condolences from the Board of Ed. Moving on, I inadvertently skipped an agenda item. I'm sure I will be reminded of it tomorrow, but the agenda item was approval of minutes. That was number 5. So I'd like to go back to that before we move on. In our packets, we have meeting minutes of the meetings held April 22nd and May 6th. Does any board member have a motion on the meeting minutes? And let me get back here. Adam?
Mr. Chair, I move that the Board of Education approve the minutes from meetings held on April 22nd, 2021 and May 6th, 2021.
Thank you. Is there a second? Oh, and seconded. Catherine, you were about a tenth behind. Any edits or changes to the meeting minutes? Seems we have none. The motion is that the Board of Education approve the minutes from meetings held on April 22nd, 2021 and May 6th, 2021. All those in favor, please raise your hands. It is unanimous. Thank you, team. Old business, we have no old business. Audience will check one more time. Jeff, has there been any new comments or questions come in since last update?
No, sir.
Thank you. New business, very quickly. Chairperson update is very brief. Upcoming CABE webinar for board members is a legislation wrap up on June 14th. This is where we'll get the summary of any new laws, which seems to be many, and regulations updated going to impact the boards. If you have registered, please do. It's free. We've been talking to Dr. Solon throughout the course of this year of doing a Board of Ed retreat after the end of the school year, and most boards of eds do this to do a little bit of team building, but also work with the administration team and setting goals for next school year. So I think over the next couple of weeks, we'll talk about that and try to send the date. Culinary. Oh, I just want to add, I have the honor of going to Miss Wilderman's class tomorrow at Cheshire High School in culinary and doing a class on schnitzel. These are the fillets of various cuts of meat that is very famous in Germany and in Austria. So if folks smell schnitzel throughout Cheshire tomorrow, that is why. And I wouldn't be surprised if we get some visitors from in and around central office to stop by, which is good because there should be plenty. So look forward to that. Should be a lot of fun. Other than that, I don't have any other updates. We have no new business. Before we adjourn into executive session, I do want to read the upcoming meetings, if I can find my agenda. So upcoming meetings, Tuesday, June 1st, 6:30 p.m. Policy Committee will be meeting. It will be virtual. Thursday, June 3rd at 7:30 p.m. There will be a Board of Ed business meeting, and they'll be live in Town Council chambers. Monday, June 14th at 7 p.m. is Kirkin Committee meeting. It will be virtual. And Tuesday, June 30th at 7:30 p.m. is our end of the year fiscal meeting. Location will be to be determined. That being said, we do have a motion to adjourn an executive session. And just for folks that may be watching this evening, if you are, thank you for sticking around so long. But we will, once we go to executive session, we will not be coming back to this meeting because there'll be no action. So you don't have to stick around and wait for us to see what comes out of that. That being said, do we have a motion from the board to adjourn into executive session? Catherine makes the motion. Is there a second? Andrew. The motion is that the meeting be adjourned into executive session to include Dr. Solon to discuss the superintendent's evaluation with no action to follow. All those in favor? Thank you. This meeting is adjourned. We are now adjourning to executive session. And for Board of Education members, a reminder that there is a separate link for the executive session in your